forest remembers everything. Every predator that stalked through moonlit shadows. Every scream that died beneath moss-covered roots. Every unnatural thing that crawled from the spaces between worlds. Geralt of Rivia walked through such a forest now, tracking prints that shouldn't exist, claws that carved stone like butter, a gait that shifted between quadruped and something disturbingly upright. The creature's scent carried wrongness, a metallic tang mixed with ozone and decay that made even his mutated senses recoil. This was no common monster. Geralt had seen griffins tear through village livestock, watched drowners emerge from cursed waters, faced vampires who wore nobility like a mask. But this thing carried the signature of a conjunction event, those rare, catastrophic moments when reality grew thin and worlds bled into one another. The trail had appeared 3 days ago, near a farming hamlet. Livestock drained of blood. Symbols burned into earth. And always, that smell like lightning striking a graveyard. Geralt's medallion vibrated against his chest, a constant tremor that spoke of powerful magic nearby. Not the hedge magic of rural cunning folk. Not even the calculated spells of sorceresses. This was fundamental, primal, the kind of power that existed before words gave it shape. The trees opened into a clearing carved by violence. Branches hung at unnatural angles. The ground bore scorch marks arranged in geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly. And there, in the center of devastation, the creature fed on something that might have once been human. It turned as Geralt approached. 6 eyes arranged in a triangle across a face that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Skin that flickered between scales, fur, and something like star-filled void. When it moved, reality rippled around it like disturbed water. Geralt drew his silver sword. The blade sang as it left the scabbard, a sound that had preceded the death of countless monsters. His other hand moved in practiced patterns, forming the sign for Quen. Golden light shimmered around him, a protective shield born from years of training and genetic modification. The creature lunged with impossible speed. Geralt sidestepped, silver blade carving through alien flesh. The thing screamed, a sound that existed in frequencies beyond normal hearing, felt more than heard. Black ichor sprayed from the wound, hissing where it touched earth. They danced the ancient dance of hunter and hunted. Geralt's movements were economy itself, no wasted motion, each strike calculated for maximum effect. The creature fought with chaotic fury, reshaping limbs mid-attack, bending space to appear behind him. But Geralt had fought monsters for decades. Pattern recognition was survival. And every monster, no matter how alien, had patterns. He saw his opening. As the creature overextended, Geralt channeled Igni through his left hand. Fire erupted, engulfing the thing's center mass. It shrieked and stumbled backward directly toward the scorched geometric patterns on the ground. Too late, Geralt realized his mistake. The symbols flared with light that hurt his cat-slit eyes. Reality tore. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally split open like rotted fabric. Beyond the tear, Geralt glimpsed something that made his Witcher-trained mind rebel, a churning storm of colors that shouldn't exist, shapes that defied geometry, and screaming. Endless screaming. The creature, dying, threw itself into the portal, and Geralt, still mid-strike, momentum carrying him forward, couldn't stop. His silver sword pierced the creature's skull at the exact moment they both crossed the threshold. The portal collapsed. Reality snapped shut like a bear trap. But Geralt was already falling through something that wasn't space, drowning in something that wasn't water, burning in something that wasn't fire. The Immaterium, his Witcher senses, designed to detect magic and danger, went into overload. Every nerve screamed warnings. His cat eyes tried to close against impossible colors. His enhanced hearing picked up whispers in languages that predated language itself. Emotions crashed over him like physical waves: terror, rage, despair, pleasure twisted into agony. This was the warp, the realm of souls and demons, the place where mortal minds came to shatter. Geralt's mutations saved him. The trial of grasses had rebuilt him at a cellular level, granting resistance to toxins, disease, and mental manipulation. Decades of facing horror had calloused his psyche. He didn't break. He didn't scream. He endured dot, and in the warp, endurance was noticed. Shapes coalesced around him. Things with too many eyes, too many mouths, too many limbs arranged in configurations that violated natural law. Demons, though Geralt had no name for them yet. Predators that fed on emotion and terror. They circled him like wolves around wounded prey, curious, hungry, confused. This mortal soul didn't break, didn't beg, didn't offer worship or bargains. It simply existed, a stone in a storm. Warped still, yet magically altered in ways they couldn't comprehend. The greatest predators in existence had found something new to hunt, and Geralt of Rivia, butcher of Blaviken, White Wolf, had found himself in a forest far darker than any he'd walked before. They came at him from angles that shouldn't exist. The first demon was a thing of claws and hunger, manifesting from the screaming colors with a shriek that would have paralyzed a normal human. Geralt's hand moved in the practiced gesture for art. Kinetic force exploded outward, and something unexpected happened. The demon didn't just get pushed back. It destabilized. Its warped flesh rippled and tore like paper in a hurricane. The entity's scream changed pitch from triumph to confusion to pain. It scattered into motes of impossible light, dispersing back into the churning madness of the Immaterium. Geralt processed this with a monster hunter's instinct. Art worked. Better than it should. The sign's force disrupted whatever held these creatures together. 3 more demons manifested, learning from their brother's mistake. They attacked from different vectors simultaneously, trying to overwhelm him through numbers. Geralt's left hand traced Igni's pattern, while his right brought up Quen's golden shimmer. Fire erupted. But not normal fire. When Igni's flames touched warp flesh, they burned with unnatural intensity, white-hot and hungry, consuming demon stuff like dry kindling. The creatures shrieked and recoiled, their forms blistering and blackening under flames that shouldn't exist in this realm. The third demon came from above. Geralt's Quen shield flared as psychic talons raked across it. The protective barrier held, but more importantly, it did something else. The demon's mental scream, a psychic assault designed to shred sanity, bounced harmlessly off the golden light. Quen didn't just protect his body. It shielded his mind. Geralt filed that information away with cold efficiency. His mutations let him think clearly, even here, even now. Decades of preparation before every hunt had taught him that knowledge was survival. Understand your prey. Understand their weaknesses. Adapt. More demons gathered. Dozens now. A feeding frenzy forming around this curious morsel that refused to be consumed. Geralt planted his feet and traced Erden on the non-ground beneath him. The purple-white glyph blazed into existence. A trap circle. A binding sign. The demons that crossed into Erden's radius suddenly found themselves moving through molasses. Their impossible speed became sluggish. Their reality-bending movements became linear and predictable. The trap didn't just slow them physically. It anchored them, forced them into something approaching physical law. Geralt's silver sword became a whirlwind. Each strike carried the precision of a master swordsman and the efficiency of a professional killer. He didn't fight with rage or desperation. He fought like a witcher, clinical, calculated, every movement serving a purpose. Demon flesh parted under silver edge. Entities that had terrorized mortals since time immemorial found themselves hunted by something they couldn't classify. Not a psyker, his power had no warp signature. Not a demon, his soul was stubbornly, defiantly mortal. Not purely human, his mutations made him something between. The warp itself seemed confused by him. This realm of emotion and chaos couldn't get purchase on his disciplined mind. His decades of controlling the beast within, of maintaining humanity despite monstrous mutations, had forged a psyche unusually resistant to corruption. Geralt cycled through his signs with practiced rhythm. Art to scatter groups. Igni to burn the persistent ones. Erden to trap the fast ones. Quen to weather the psychic assaults. Exi he tried it once on a gibbering horror, and watched with grim satisfaction as the mind-affecting sign caused the demon's multiple heads to turn on each other in confusion. His Witcher training treated these warp horrors like any other monster. Observe their attack patterns. Identify weaknesses. Exploit ruthlessly. The fact that they violated every natural law he understood was irrelevant. Geralt had fought things that shouldn't exist before. These were just another contract. But in the depths of the Immaterium, beyond the battle, beyond the shrieking demons, something far greater noticed that four presences. Vast beyond comprehension. Ancient beyond time. The Chaos Gods themselves turned their attention to this anomaly swimming through their domain. A mortal who didn't worship. A soul tempered by pain, but not broken. A being that wielded power through discipline, rather than passion. Khorne noted his combat prowess and emotional. Control blood spilled without rage. Tzeentch observed his tactical adaptability and rejection of fate change embraced, but never worshipped. Nurgle sensed his acceptance of death and toxin-laced. Biology entropy acknowledged, but not celebrated. Slaanesh felt his controlled aggression and aesthetic. Precision perfection pursued, but never obsessed over. He was anathema to their nature. A soul that existed in balance when this realm was defined by extremes. The Chaos Gods didn't just notice Geralt of Rivia. They became curious. And in Warhammer 40K, curiosity from the Dark Gods was rarely a blessing. Geralt, oblivious to the cosmic attention, continued his grim work. Silver blade rising and falling. Signs flaring in rhythmic sequence. A witcher doing what witchers do best, surviving the impossible. The warp churned around him, trying to digest this foreign element. But Geralt had endured the trial of grasses. Had survived the mutations that killed 7 out of 10 boys. Had walked through decades of hatred and fear from the very people he protected. This was just another trial. Another crucible. Another hunt. And somewhere in the screaming infinity of the Immaterium, reality began preparing to spit him out. Geralt hit solid ground for the first time in what might have been hours or centuries. Time had no meaning in the warp. His witcher metabolism immediately began purging the psychic toxins from his system. His cat eyes adjusted to actual light-dim, red-tinged, filtered through smog-choked atmosphere. He was in rubble. The shattered remains of what might have once been a city. Gothic architecture torn apart by violence. Statues of a crowned figure repeated everywhere, each one defaced or melted. The air tasted of promethium, burning flesh, and despair. Geralt's medallion vibrated. Danger. Close. He heard them before he saw them. Screaming. Not human. Screaming something that had been human once, but had given up that claim. Geralt rose to his feet, silver sword already in hand, and moved toward the sound with a hunter's stealth. Around a collapsed wall, he found the source. Mutants. Dozens of them. Flesh twisted by something that made his witcher mutations look subtle. Extra limbs sprouted from torsos. Faces split into multiple screaming mouths. Skin covered in eyes that wept blood. They attacked a fortified position where human soldiers in gray uniforms fought desperately. Geralt assessed the situation with professional detachment. The soldiers were losing. The mutants fought with chaos-blessed strength and pain tolerance that let them shrug off wounds that should be fatal. In minutes, the position would be overrun. Not his fight. Not his world. Not his contract. But Geralt had never been good at walking away from people about to die. He moved like liquid shadow, closing the distance before the mutants registered his presence. His silver sword carved through corrupted flesh with surgical precision. These things were similar enough to the creatures he just fought in the warp. Chaos-tainted, demon-touched. The silver did its work. The first 3 died before they knew he was there. The next 5 turned to face this new threat and met Igni's flames. Their warp-twisted biology burned beautifully. The remaining mutants charged in a wave of claws and screaming mouths. Geralt's blade became a silver arc of death. Each movement was economical, efficient, deadly. No flourishes, no wasted energy. Just a witcher doing wet work. Art scattered a cluster of them. Erden trapped the fast ones, long enough for his blade to find necks and hearts. Quen absorbed blows that would have gutted a normal human in less than 2 minutes. The mutant horde was corpses. Geralt turned to face the soldiers, sword still raised, ready for the gratitude of those he'd just saved. Instead, he found lasguns pointed at his chest. The Imperial Guard had trained for many threats. Orcs, Tyranids, Chaos cultists. traitor Marines. But this? A lone figure with white hair, cat eyes, two swords, and abilities that looked like sorcery but felt wrong in ways their basic training couldn't categorize? The sergeant's voice was hard. On your knees, mutant. Hands behind your head. Geralt considered his options. He could fight, probably win. These soldiers were skilled, but not enhanced. Their weapons were advanced. Those laser rifles could hurt, but he'd fought worse odds. But they weren't his enemies. They'd been defending against the same monsters he'd just killed. Starting a war with potential allies in an unknown world seemed tactically unsound. He lowered his sword slowly. Didn't sheathe it. Didn't drop it. Just lowered it to a non-threatening position. His voice, when he spoke, carried the gravelly tone of someone unused to wasted words. Not a mutant. Witcher. Professional monster hunter. The words meant nothing to them. He could see it in their eyes. Confusion mixed with fear, mixed with the fanatical certainty that came from religious indoctrination. These were soldiers who'd been taught to hate deviation with the passion most men reserved for love. More soldiers arrived, then officers, then someone in robes covered in skulls and parchments. A psyker. Geralt recognized the type magic user, though the technique felt completely different from the sorceresses he'd known. The psyker approached cautiously, third eye already glowing with activation. Geralt felt the mental probe delicate at first, testing his defenses. The psyker's expression changed from confidence to confusion to shock. The probe hit harder. Geralt's mind, tempered by decades of discipline and mutations that stabilized his psyche, held firm. Not aggressively. He didn't push back, just endured. Like enduring everything else in his long life. The psyker screamed and collapsed, blood streaming from nose and ears. Lasguns pressed closer. Fingers tightened on triggers. The sergeant's voice was pure ice. Witchcraft, heresy. You're coming with us, creature. Geralt could have explained. Could have told them about signs and mutations and the difference between witcher magic and whatever sorcery they feared. But he'd learned long ago that when people decided you were a monster, words rarely changed their minds. He let them take him. Let them bind his hands with restraints that were laughably inadequate for his strength. Let them confiscate his swords and pouches, watching with dark amusement as they handled the potions like they might explode. They transported him to an outpost. Walls made of metal and stone, covered in those same statues of the crowned figure. Inside, he was thrown into a cell that looked designed to hold something far more dangerous than him. More questioning. More officials. Each one looking at him. Like he was a puzzle that might eat them if solved incorrectly. They asked about his weapons, his abilities, his allegiance, his homeworld. Geralt answered truthfully. Rivia, the Witcher School of the Wolf, Kaer Morhen, monster hunting, professional neutrality. Every answer made them more suspicious. And somewhere, in the deeper sections of the outpost, messages were being sent. Astropathic calls going out to higher authorities. Because the Imperial Guard had captured something that didn't fit any known category. Something that killed chaos-tainted mutants with ease. Something that resisted psychic probing. Something that used powers without any detectable warp signature. Something that remained calm when any normal human should be terrified. They'd caught something unprecedented. And in the Imperium of man, unprecedented things were rarely allowed to live. The Inquisitor arrived 3 days later. Geralt heard him. Before seeing him, mechanical footsteps echoing through corridors, preceded by whispered prayers and fearful silence. When the cell door finally opened, the man who entered was more machine than flesh. Bionic eye glowing red. Servo arm attached to his spine. Beneath the augmetics and inquisitorial regalia, Geralt sensed zealotry so pure it had calcified into something approaching madness. Inquisitor Crevis of the Ordo Malleus, Daemon Hunter, investigator of warp-tainted anomalies, and extremely interested in the impossible thing his Imperial Guard had captured. You killed 17 chaos-tainted mutants in 107 seconds, Crevis said, voice modulated by augmetic implants. Without bolter, without chainsword, without prayer or benediction. The sergeant's report describes sorcery. The psyker's medical report describes psychic backlash from contact with your mind, yet you produce no warp signature. Explain. Geralt met the bionic eye without flinching. Already did. Witcher, monster hunter. Born and trained for it. Trained where? What forge world produces your augmetics? What gene seed creates your mutations? Your eyes alone suggest xeno-corruption or chaos modification. Yet you resist demonic influence. You have no allegiance markers, no chapter, no regiment, no documented origin in any Imperial records. Because I'm not from your Imperium, Geralt said flatly. Different world. Pulled here through something you'd probably call a warp rift. Not by choice. The Inquisitor's flesh and blood eye narrowed. Convenient. Impossible to verify. Classic infiltration narrative. Tech priests entered then, a procession of red-robed figures carrying his confiscated equipment like holy relics. They laid everything on a metal table. Silver sword, steel sword, potions in leather pouches. His medallion, the lead tech priest activated instruments that hummed with power. They ran scanners over his weapons, his potions, his equipment. Each scan produced results that made them chant prayers to their machine god. The blades, the tech priest intoned in binary-laced Gothic. Metallurgical composition unknown. Forging technique unrecorded in any STC database. The silver blade, especially molecular structure, suggests properties antithetical to warp entities. Another tech priest held up a potion bottle. These chemical compounds should be lethal. Nightshade, white Raffard, Necker eyes, somehow stabilized in suspension. Human consumption would result in immediate organ failure. Geralt spoke up. Made for Witcher metabolism. Would kill normal humans. I'm not normal. Grievous turned back to him. So you admit to mutation? Admit? I stated it from the start. Witchers are mutated. Trial of grasses. Alchemical process. Makes us faster, stronger, resistant to toxins and disease. Lets us use signs. Signs? The word dripped with suspicion. Magic. Sort of. Simplified spells. 5 main forms. Art, Igni, Erden, Quen, Axi. Kinetic force, fire, magical trap, shield, mental influence. Trained into us through years of practice. The tech priests conferred in rapid binary. One approached with a device that looked like it measured psychic energy. They held it near Geralt while ordering him to demonstrate. Geralt shrugged internally and formed Igni's pattern with his left hand. Fire burst from his palm. The tech priest's device remained silent. No warp signature detected. No psychic resonance. The flame simply existed through mechanisms. Their instruments couldn't explain. The silence in the room was profound. Kra of us broke it. Impossible. Magic without the warp is heretical doctrine. All psychic phenomenon stems from Immaterium contact. You are either lying about the source of your power, or you represent something far more dangerous than simple mutation. Or, Geralt said with the patience of someone who'd explained his nature 1,000 times, your understanding isn't complete. Where I'm from, magic exists separate from what you call the warp. Different source. Different rules. Heresy. Reality. They stared at each other. Fanatic versus pragmatist. Faith versus experience. It was a conversation Geralt had endured in countless forms. Witch hunters calling him abomination. Peasants calling him monster. Nobility calling him necessary evil. Always the same pattern. Always the same fear of the different. The tech priests continued their examination. They tested his blood impossibly toxic. His skin resistant to standard cutting implements. His eyes pupils that contracted to vertical slits in bright light, expanded to capture maximum illumination in darkness. His heartbeat 30 beats per minute at rest, capable of spiking to superhuman levels under stress. Every test produced the same conclusion. He was modified, extensively, through processes that didn't match any known Imperial augmentation. Gene seed enhancement? No. Chaos corruption? No warp taint detected. Xeno-hybridization? No alien DNA markers. He was simply impossible by their standards. Crevice paced, servo-arm flexing unconsciously. The Ordo Malleus has faced demon princes, sorcerers of the dark gods, entities from beyond reality. We have methods, classifications. Every threat fits categories refined over 10,000 years of constant war. He stopped directly in front of Geralt's cell. But you don't fit. And things that don't fit are either weapons to be wielded or threats to be eliminated. I'm neither, Geralt said. I'm a witcher. Point me at monsters. I kill them. That's the arrangement. Has been for decades? Decades? Crevis laughed without humor. You look no older than 30 standard years. Witchers age slower. Side effect of the mutations. I'm over 90. Another impossibility added to the pile. The Inquisitor turned to leave, his entourage following. At the threshold, he looked back. You will remain here while the Ordo determines your classification. Pray to whatever gods you acknowledge that we decide you're useful. Because if we determine you're a threat, he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Geralt sat back against the cell wall, cat eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He'd been imprisoned before, threatened before, sentenced to death before. He was still alive. Patience was a witcher virtue. The attack came at midnight, though, in this smog-choked world. Midnight looked identical to noon. Geralt heard it before the alarm sounded. His enhanced hearing picked up the psychic screen propagating through reality. A summoning. A beacon. The kind of ritual that tore the barrier between real space and the Immaterium. His medallion, confiscated, but not far away, began vibrating so violently it could be heard rattling against the table where they'd stored it. Then reality split open above the outpost. The sky turned inside out. Colors that had no names bled across the heavens. The air itself screamed as a massive warp rift yawned wide, vomiting horrors into the material universe. Demons. Hundreds of them. Pink horrors cackling with manic glee. Bloodletters thirsting for skulls. Plague-bearers spreading disease with every shambling step. Daemonettes moving with lethal grace. The Imperial Guard responded with disciplined precision. Lasguns barked. Heavy bolters roared. Soldiers shouted prayers to their god-emperor as they fought entities from nightmare. But discipline and faith could only carry them so far. Demons didn't die like mortal enemies. Killing them required sanctified weapons, psyker support, or faith so pure it manifested as actual force. The outpost had limited resources of all three. Geralt's cell was in the lower levels. He felt the building shake as demonic forces crashed into Imperial defenses. Heard screaming both human terror and demonic hunger. Smelled the unique stench of warp corruption mixing with burning flesh. His cell door wasn't locked through conventional means. Some kind of magnetic seal tied to power generators. When a demon prince's fist punched through the outpost's eastern wall, power flickered. For 3 seconds, the magnetic seal failed. 3 seconds was enough for a witcher. Geralt moved through corridors with predatory speed. Soldiers ran past him, too focused on the demonic invasion to stop an escaped prisoner. He followed his senses toward where they'd stored his equipment. The storage room's door had been torn open, not by him, by something with claws and a taste for violence. His swords lay amid wreckage. Geralt grabbed them, feeling the familiar weight settle into place like extensions of his own arms. The silver blade practically sang in the presence of so much demonic corruption. He checked his potions most intact, a few shattered. Good enough? He drank swallow first. The healing potion coursed through his system, preparing his body for the violence ahead. Then cat, enhancing his already superior vision. His veins turned black as the toxicity built up. For a human, this would be lethal. For a witcher, it was Tuesday. Geralt climbed toward the main combat zone. The sounds of battle grew louder. Screaming intensified. He emerged into a courtyard that had become Hell's antechamber. Guardsmen died in clusters, pulled apart by demons that laughed as they killed. A commissar stood alone against 3 bloodletters, his power sword flickering against demonic blades. Psykers attempted to force back the warp tide, their minds burning out from the effort. Blood soaked the ground. Bodies, some Imperial, some demonic, carpeted the stone. Nobody noticed Geralt at first. He was just another figure in the chaos dot, and he formed Igni and sent a column of white-hot flame into a pack of pink horrors. The demons combusted like they were made of napalm. Their cackling turned to shrieking as fire consumed warp flesh with unnatural hunger. Every horror in the pack scattered into motes of psychic energy, banished back to the Immaterium. Now they noticed him, a bloodletter-charged, brass sword raised for a killing blow. Geralt sidestepped with precise timing and brought his silver blade up in a rising slash that opened the demon from groin to neck. The entity's howl of rage became a death rattle as silver disrupted its essence. More came. They always did. Demons sensed weakness, fed on fear, hunted in packs like predatory beasts. But Geralt wasn't weak, wasn't afraid. He was a witcher in his element, monsters everywhere, and a contract to fulfill. Art exploded outward, scattering a cluster of plague-bearers. Their diseased flesh rippled and destabilized under the kinetic force. Before they could recover, Geralt was among them, silver sword carving through necrotic meat with surgical precision. A daemonette tried to flank him, moving with supernatural speed and predatory grace. It met Erden's trap circle, suddenly slowed to mortal speeds. Geralt's blade removed its head before it realized it had been caught. He worked through the courtyard like a farmer harvesting wheat. No wasted movement, no unnecessary risks. Every action calculated for maximum efficiency. When demons clustered, he used Igni to burn them en masse. When they spread out, his silver blade found throats and hearts. When they tried to overwhelm him through numbers, Quen's golden shield absorbed blows while he repositioned. The Imperial guardsmen watched in stunned silence between their own fights. This mutant prisoner, this heretic they'd captured, fought demons with a casual efficiency that mocked their own desperate struggles. He moved through a battlefield of nightmares like a man taking a stroll through familiar woods. One soldier, bleeding from a dozen wounds, found himself cornered by horrors. He'd lost his lasgun. His combat knife was laughably inadequate. Death approached on burning feet. Geralt's Quen shield expanded, encompassing the soldier. The golden barrier absorbed demonic claws that would have disemboweled the man. Geralt's sword flashed, and the horrors became corpses. He didn't stop to acknowledge the guardsman's stammered thanks. Just moved to the next threat, saved another soldier, then another. Not out of altruism, not out of heroism. Simply because they were fighting the same monsters, and Geralt had never been good at standing aside while people died. A demon prince descended from the sky. Massive, wreathed in warp flame. 4 arms ending in swords, forged from solidified malice. It saw Geralt and recognized him, the anomaly from the warp, the soul that wouldn't break. Their duel was brief and brutal. The demon prince attacked with all 4 arms simultaneously. Geralt rolled under the first strike, parried the second, used art to deflect the third, and let Quen absorb the fourth. His silver blade opened a wound across the demon's leg. The prince roared and redoubled its assault. Geralt responded by drinking a northern wind bomb from his pouch and throwing it directly at the demon's chest. The bomb detonated in a blast of supernatural cold. Warp flesh froze solid. Cracks appeared in demonic armor. Geralt's silver sword found the gaps, pierced the frozen armor, reached whatever passed for a heart in creatures of pure malice. The demon prince's scream shook the outpost walls as it dissolved back into the Immaterium. The remaining demons, seeing their champion fall, lost cohesion. Some fled back through the warp rift. Others fought with increased desperation. But the tide had turned. Imperial forces rallied. Commissars barked orders. Psykers focused their remaining strength on sealing the rift. Geralt stood in the center. Of devastation, twin swords dripping with ichor that evaporated into psychic smoke. His armor was torn. His body carried wounds that would cripple normal humans. But he remained standing, cat eyes glowing in the darkness, face expressionless dot around him. Imperial guardsmen whispered. Some called him saint. Others called him witch. A few simply called him effective. And from his vantage point on the command tower, Inquisitor Grievous watched the impossible mutant with calculations running behind augmetic eyes. The Imperium needed weapons. Against Chaos Dot, this witcher had just proven himself the sharpest blade available. They arrived like falling stars. Drop pods screaming through atmosphere, thrusters burning away smog and ash. Impact craters forming in the outpost's parade ground. Ceramite-clad giants emerging from smoke and fire. Space Marines. Black Templars? Geralt learned later. Warriors of the Adeptus Astartes. Gene-forged demigods of war who defended the Imperium for 10,000 years. 8 feet tall in armor that could withstand tank shells. Carrying weapons that could level buildings. Each one worth 100 normal soldiers. Geralt watched them deploy with professional assessment. Enhanced physiologies similar to Witcher's, but taken to extremes. Strength that outclassed his by significant margins. Armor that would shrug off his silver blade. Weapons that could tear him apart if they connected. Dangerous. Very dangerous. The Templar sergeant approached across corpse-strewn ground. Black armor adored with purity seals and oath papers. Skull helm with glowing red lenses. Chainsword maglock to hip, bolter in hand. He stopped 10 feet from Geralt and spoke through external vox speakers. The mutant who kills demons. Inquisitor Crevis has submitted a report. You are to be detained pending further examination. Geralt's hand rested on his silver sword hilt, not threatening. Just present. Just finished saving this outpost. Seems poor gratitude. Gratitude is irrelevant. You are an unclassified anomaly. Anomalies are contained. Other Templars formed a loose circle. Not tight enough to prevent escape. Tight enough to prevent casual exit. Geralt recognized tactical positioning when he saw it. These warriors had fought countless battles. Their movements spoke of perfect coordination and lethal efficiency. He could run. Probably get clear. Witcher's speed and signs might create enough confusion. But running meant making enemies of potential allies. And something told Geralt that these Space Marines, unlike the Inquisition, might actually listen to reason. Or they'd kill him. That was also possible. If I refuse? Geralt asked. Then we determine if you're as effective against Astartes as you are against demons. It wasn't quite a challenge. Wasn't quite a threat. More like professional curiosity. Geralt recognized that too. He'd felt the same thing facing legendary monsters. The desire to test yourself against something worthy. Non-lethal, Geralt said. I don't kill people trying to do their jobs, even when their jobs are misguided. The sergeant's helm tilted slightly. Something that might have been amusement. Agreed. First blood or disarm. Standard honor duel protocols. The other Templars backed away, forming a wider circle. This was ritual now. Ancient practice. 2 warriors testing each other's measure. The outpost survivors gathered to watch. Guardsmen who'd fought beside Geralt. Tech priests who'd examined him. Even Inquisitor Crevis emerged to observe. The sergeant removed his bolter, handed it to another Templar. Drew his chainsword. The weapon roared to life, teeth blurring into lethal rotation. He held it in a 2-handed grip despite being able to wield it one-handed, showing respect for the opponent. Geralt drew his silver blade, formed Quen with his offhand. Golden light shimmered around him. They moved. The sergeant attacked with practiced precision. Chainsword came down in an overhead strike that would have bisected a normal human. Geralt sidestepped, silver blade intercepting the chainsword at an angle. Sparks flew where silver met adamantium teeth. The force of impact would have shattered a normal sword. Silver held, enchanted, and alchemically treated. Geralt riposted low. The sergeant's ceramite boot intercepted, turning the strike. Counter-attack came instantly, a horizontal slash at chest height. Geralt ducked under it, rolled forward, came up inside the sergeant's guard. Arc at point-blank range. The kinetic blast caught the Templar center mass. 800 pounds of armored Space Marine slid backward 3 feet, boots carving furrows in stone. Not knocked down, not disabled, but moved. The circle of watching Astartes murmured. Moving a Space Marine in full armor was not something normal humans could do. The sergeant recovered instantly and pressed forward. His attacks became a flowing series of strikes, each one building on the last. High, low, feint left, strike right. Chainsword work that spoke of centuries of training and decades of battle experience. Geralt defended with minimalist efficiency. Each parry exactly strong enough to redirect, never meeting force with force. His Witcher training emphasized economy. Don't clash with superior strength. Redirect it. Use it against itself. He watched the sergeant's movements with enhanced perception. Read the microtelegraphs that preceded strikes. Saw the weight shifts that indicated direction changes. Decades of fighting monsters with superhuman speed had taught him to read bodies like books. The sergeant feinted high. Geralt's silver blade rose to parry. But the feint was doubled. The high strike was itself misdirection. The chain's word reversed trajectory mid-swing, coming low for Geralt's legs. Geralt jumped, enhanced leg muscles propelling him over the blade. Formed Igni, while airborne, and sent flame washing over the sergeant's helm. Fire didn't hurt through ceramite and environmental seals, but it obscured vision. For half a second, the sergeant's view was nothing but white-hot flames. Half a second was enough. Geralt landed, dropped low, and swept his silver blade at the sergeant's ankle joint, one of the few vulnerable points on Space Marine armor. The blade connected with the flexibility seal between boot and greave. Not cutting through, just touching, drawing the barest scratch across the rubberized material. First blood. Technically, Geralt stepped back, lowering his sword. Your point. You're stronger, tougher, better equipped. But I'm fast enough and experienced enough to find the gaps. We keep fighting. Maybe you win. Maybe I get lucky. Either way, we've proven we're both competent. The sergeant activated his chain's word, knelt to examine the scratch on his armor seal. When he rose, his Vox speakers carried something that might have been respect. You fight with honor, skill without pride, efficiency without cruelty. He turned to the other Templars. This one is no heretic, no chaos corruption. Just a warrior from circumstances we don't understand. Not all of them agreed. Geralt could see it in their body language. But Space Marines respected martial prowess above most things. He'd proven himself not as an abomination. As a fighter, the sergeant extended a ceramite gauntlet. I am Sergeant Godwin. The Inquisition may demand your detention, but the Black Templars recognize a fellow crusader when we see one. Geralt clasped the offered hand. Human flesh against armored might. He'd made allies in the Imperium's most fanatical warriors. It was a start. The trial, if it could be called that, convened in the outpost's chapel. A massive chamber dominated by statues of the God Emperor. Walls covered in prayers written in languages Geralt didn't recognize. Inquisitor Crevis sat at a throne-like chair flanked by servoskulls and oath scribes. Tech priests formed one side of the assembly. Black Templars, including Sergeant Godwin, stood on the other. Imperial Guard officers filled the back. Geralt stood in the center, alone, no restraints. He'd been offered armor repair and medical aid. Had accepted the former, declined the latter. His Witcher metabolism had already closed wounds that should have taken weeks to heal. Crevis spoke with the authority of someone used to absolute obedience. This tribunal will determine the fate of the entity designated Geralt of Rivia. Testimony has been compiled. Evidence examined. Theological assessment completed. The Ordo Malleus has reached a conclusion. Geralt remained silent. He'd learned that in these situations, speaking rarely helped. You possess abilities that mimic psychic powers, but produce no warp signature. You resist demonic corruption, despite lacking faith in the God Emperor. You wield weapons of unknown origin, and employ mutant enhancements through unrecorded processes. You killed 17 chaos-tainted mutants, and contributed significantly to repelling a demonic incursion. Crevis leaned forward, bionic eye whirring as it focused. You are an anomaly, and anomalies represent threat vectors that the Imperium cannot tolerate. I saved lives, Geralt said flatly. Killed enemies of your Imperium. Didn't ask for payment or worship. Just did the work because it needed doing. Irrelevant. Your actions, while tactically advantageous, do not negate your heretical nature. You refuse to acknowledge the God Emperor's divinity. You demonstrate powers outside approved Imperial structures. You cannot be classified, controlled, or contained within existing frameworks. The Inquisitor's augmentic hand clenched. The Ordo Malleus exists to protect humanity from warp-born threats. You may not be warp-born, but you are a threat nonetheless. Sergeant Godwin stepped forward. Inquisitor, with respect, this warrior has proven his honor through combat. The Black Templars recognize. The Black Templars are not the Inquisition, Kravis interrupted. Your input is noted and dismissed. This matter concerns theology and Imperium security, not martial honor. The tension in the chamber thickened. Space Marines didn't take dismissal well. But inquisitorial authority superseded even Astartes in matters of heresy and corruption. Geralt felt the political currents shifting, saw the calculations behind augmetic eyes. He'd been useful once, but useful things that couldn't be controlled were more dangerous than useless things that obeyed. The verdict, Kravis announced, is summary execution, to be carried out immediately by sanctioned methods. May the God Emperor have mercy on your anomalous soul. No surprise. Geralt had been sentenced to death before. Novigrad's witch hunters, Temerian nobles, Nilfgaardian officers. Always the same pattern. Fear of difference manifesting as righteous murder. Armed guards moved forward. Shock walls activated. They'd learned from the first capture. No restraints this time. Just overwhelming force. Geralt's hands moved to his sword hilts. Not drawing yet. Just ready, if I refuse? He asked, already knowing the answer. Then you prove our assessment correct. A threat that must be eliminated by any means necessary. The guards closed in. Geralt measured distances, calculated odds. He could kill them, probably, but more would come. And then he'd have to kill Space Marines, who didn't deserve death for following orders. And even if he escaped, he'd be hunted across this entire world by an organization that commanded armies and had weapons that could crack planets. Sometimes the only winning move was not to play. Geralt drew his swords in a blur of motion. Guards flinched, raising weapons. Space Marines reached for bolters, but Geralt's blades didn't strike humans. Instead, he pivoted and slashed through the chapel's stained glass window in one fluid motion. Sunlight dim and red-tinged poured through the gap. He turned back to face the assembly. I won't kill your soldiers. Won't fight your Space Marines. Not going to give you the proof you need that I'm a monster. His cat eyes glowed in the blood-colored light. But I'm not dying because you can't classify me either. He ran not toward the guards, toward the broken window, enhanced muscles propelling him into a leap that carried him through the gap. He hit the ground 20 feet below, rolled, came up running. Behind him, alarms blared. Lasguns fired. But Geralt was already moving through the outpost's lower levels, using his Witcher senses to navigate by sound and scent. He heard pursuit. Heavy footsteps. Ceramite on stone. Space Marines, faster than human soldiers, but still tracking him. Geralt formed Erden behind him as he ran, leaving magical trap circles in his wake. The pursuing Astartes hit them and found their superhuman speed reduced to mortal levels. Not stopped, just slowed enough for Geralt to maintain distance. He reached the outpost wall. 30 feet of reinforced rockcrete. No handholds. No gates nearby. Just solid barrier. Geralt drank a potion thunderbolt, increasing his strength temporarily, and used art to blast a section of damaged wall. The kinetic force, amplified by alchemical enhancement, punched through already weakened stone. A gap appeared, barely large enough. He squeezed through as bolter fire stitched the wall behind him. Explosive rounds detonating where he'd been seconds before. Outside the outpost, the world was wasteland. Ash dunes. Skeletal trees. Ruins stretching to horizons. Geralt ran into that desolation without looking back. Behind him, Sergeant Godwin watched from the wall. He could have fired. Could have called for gunship support. Could have mobilized a full hunt dot instead. He lowered his bolter. Spoke quietly to the other Templars. A warrior who refuses to kill those who don't deserve death. Who escapes rather than slaughter. The Inquisition may call that heresy. He holstered his weapon completely. I call it honor. Not all the Templars agreed. But enough did that the pursuit stayed at the wall. Geralt disappeared into the wastes. A white-haired ghost in a galaxy of endless war. Hunted, alone, unbroken. Geralt found the way station 3 days into his flight through the wasteland. A fortified supply depot built into the ruins of what might have once been a city. Imperial banners flew from makeshift walls. Refugees clustered inside civilians, fleeing from something worse than the wasteland itself. He observed from a distance, cat eyes picking out details. Guardsmen on the walls looked exhausted. Their equipment was damaged, supplies low. The civilians inside numbered in the hundreds families, elderly, children, all wearing the haunted expressions of people who'd seen too much horror. Geralt's Witcher senses picked up corruption on the wind, chaos, coming from multiple directions. And below that, something worse. Coordinated movement. This wasn't random chaos raid. This was an assault. He should keep moving. Not his fight. Not his people. The Imperium had sentenced him to death. Helping them was tactically insane. But the children reminded him of Ciri. The desperate civilians reminded him of every village he'd defended. And Geralt had never been good at tactical sanity. He approached the way station openly, hands visible, swords sheathed. The wall guards spotted him immediately. Lasguns tracked his movement. A sergeant shouted down, "Halt! Identify yourself." Geralt, Witcher, you've got chaos forces incoming. Multiple directions. Coordinated assault. Refugees inside aren't going to survive without help. We have no record of. The sergeant stopped as his Vox unit crackled with emergency transmissions. Scouts reporting enemy movement. Exactly as Geralt had predicted. The sergeant looked back down, suspicion warring with desperation. How did you know? Enhanced senses. Decades of tracking monsters. Your choice: waste time questioning me, or let me help defend this position. The gates opened. Sometimes desperation trumped protocol. Inside, Geralt assessed the situation with professional detachment. 200 civilians. 40 guardsmen. Limited ammunition. Makeshift fortifications. Against what his senses told him was coming, they had maybe an hour before being overrun. The officer in charge, a lieutenant with a cybernetic arm and 1,000-yard stare, listened to Geralt's assessment. Chaos forces converging from 3 vectors. Lead elements will hit in 40 minutes. Your walls won't hold. You need to concentrate defenders at the strongest points. Evacuate civilians to the deepest bunkers and prepare for close combat. And who are you to give tactical advice? Someone who's defended more villages than you've seen in your lifetime. You want my help or not? The lieutenant looked at his exhausted troops, looked at the refugees, made the decision that good officers made when pride was a luxury they couldn't afford. Do it. Geralt worked fast. Repositioned defenders to create overlapping fields of fire. Identified weak points in the walls and reinforced them with debris. Moved civilians into interior structures that provided cover. All while his Witcher senses tracked the approaching chaos forces. They came exactly when he predicted. Traitor guardsmen first. Former Imperial soldiers who turned to chaos worship. They attacked with fanatical fury and tactical coordination. Lasgun fire lit up the twilight. Geralt moved through the defenses like smoke, appearing where the assault was strongest. Art scattered clusters of traitors. Igni burned those carrying flamers and multigans. His silver sword carved through the ones that got close. But he avoided lethal strikes where possible. These were corrupted humans, not demons. Still people underneath the madness. Then the real threats arrived. Chaos Space Marines. Traitor Astartes in armor painted with blasphemous symbols. They smashed through the way station's walls like they were paper. Bolters roared. Loyalist guardsmen died in explosive bursts of mass reactive rounds. Geralt engaged the nearest traitor Marine with cold calculation. This wasn't a duel like with Sergeant Godwin. This was pest control. The traitor Marine swung a chainsword. Geralt used Erden to slow the strike, sidestepped, and drove his silver blade into the armor's neck seal. The weak point. The gap. Silver pierced corrupted flesh. The traitor Marine gurgled and fell. Another charged from his left. Geralt threw a northern wind bomb. The traitor Marine's armor froze, movements becoming sluggish. Geralt's blade found the eye lens, penetrating into brain matter. He fought without flourish or drama. Just efficient, brutal wet work. Target weak points. Use signs to create openings. Strike precisely. Move to next threat. But there were too many. More traitor marines poured through breaches. Behind them came cultists and mutants. The Waystation's defenders fought with desperate courage. But courage wasn't enough against superhuman enemies. Geralt drank Swallow, healing wounds faster than they accumulated. Drank Thunderbolt, pushing his already enhanced strength to supernatural levels. His veins turned black as toxicity built up. He was operating at the absolute limit of Witcher capabilities. A massive explosion rocked the eastern wall. Geralt turned to see something that made even his hardened soul feel cold. Chaos Sorcerer. Warp lightning crackling from fingertips. Mutations covering half his body. Power that made the air itself scream. The sorcerer targeted the bunker where civilians sheltered. Prepared to unleash devastation that would kill hundreds, Geralt moved faster than human perception. Crossed the courtyard in seconds. Formed Quen as he ran, the shield flaring bright enough to blind. He reached the sorcerer just as the warp lightning discharged Ku and caught the blast. Golden shield versus chaos sorcery. The impact crater under Geralt's feet was 6 inches deep. His shield shattered, but the lightning dissipated harmlessly. The sorcerer's eyes widened in shock. You, the anomaly. The warp-touched soul that won't break. My gods hunger for you. Your gods can starve, Geralt growled, and formed Igni at maximum power. White-hot flame engulfed the sorcerer. But chaos-enhanced flesh resisted. The sorcerer laughed and prepared another spell. Geralt didn't give him time. Drew his steel sword with his offhand, now wielding both blades simultaneously. Silver and steel became a whirlwind. The sorcerer blocked with telekinetic barriers, but Geralt had fought mages before. Knew their patterns. Knew their weaknesses. He feinted high with silver, struck low with steel. The steel blade, not meant for monsters but for humans, found the sorcerer's leg. Hamstrung him. As the sorcerer fell, Geralt's silver blade took his head. The chaos assault faltered. Without their sorcerer's leadership, coordination broke down. Traitor marines fought individually instead of as a unit. Cultists fled. The tide turned dot, and then drop pods screamed from the sky. Black Templars. Sergeant Godwin's unit. They'd tracked Geralt here and arrived at the critical moment. Space Marines tore into Chaos forces with Righteous. Fury, Bolters, Chainswords, Flamers, Traitor Marines who terrorized the Waystation. Suddenly found themselves OUTMATCHED. Sergeant. Godwin fought his way to Geralt's side. The Inquisition wants you dead, Witcher. But I swore to protect humanity, not murder those who defend it. Appreciate the timing, Geralt said, cutting down a cultist. Consider it repaying honor. You could have fled. Instead, you defended Imperial citizens. The sergeant's chainsword roared through a traitor marine's torso. That makes you more loyal than many who wear the Aquila. Together, loyalist Astartes and escaped Witcher drove chaos from the Waystation. The battle raged until dawn, real dawn, with actual sunlight breaking through the smog dot when it ended. The Waystation stood, battered, bloodied, but standing. Geralt sat among rubble, cleaning demon ichor from his blades. Around him, guardsmen and civilians stared with expressions mixing gratitude and fear. Sergeant Godwin approached. The Inquisition will come. When they do, I cannot protect you. Didn't ask you to, Geralt said. Just point me toward the next fight. The Space Marine nodded slowly, understanding passing between warriors dot in the grim darkness of the far future. There was only war, and Geralt of Rivia had found his place in it. The planet was called Mordian, or maybe Cadia. Geralt had stopped learning names. In this galaxy, every world was a battlefield. Every sky burned. Every horizon promised only more war. He'd been here 3 months. Or 3 years. Time moved strangely when every day was survival. The Imperium had officially declared him rogue heretic. Inquisitorial warrants circulated with his description. Kill on sight. No capture necessary, but word also spread through other channels. Guardsmen who'd fought beside him. Astartes who'd witnessed his honor. Civilians who'd survived because he defended them. Stories traveled faster than official condemnation. The White Wolf, they called him. A ghost that appeared where chaos struck. A mutant who killed demons. A heretic who defended the faithful. Geralt didn't care about the names. He cared about the contracts. And in Warhammer 40K, there were infinite contracts. He stood now on a ridge overlooking a hive city under siege. Chaos cultists had summoned something from the warp a demon prince that terrorized entire districts. The Imperium's response was to quarantine the area and bombard it from orbit once evacuation completed. Except, evacuation wasn't complete. Thousands remained trapped. The Imperium would sacrifice them. Acceptable losses. The calculus of eternal war. Geralt had heard this story before. Had watched rulers sacrifice peasants for political expediency. Had seen nobility burn villages to contain threats. It never sat right. Never would. He descended toward the hive city, twin swords on his back, potions ready. His Witcher gear had been repaired and modified with scavenged Imperial tech. His silver blade now carried a molecular edge sharpener. His armor incorporated ceramite plating. He'd adapted, survived. The demon prince sensed him coming. Good. Geralt preferred when monsters knew he was hunting them. The battle that followed would become legend in local folklore. A white-haired warrior moving through streets of nightmares. Signs flaring like miniature stars. Silver blade carving through warp flesh. The demon prince's roars shaking buildings. Geralt won. He always won. Through preparation, discipline, and the fundamental truth that monsters, no matter how powerful, were still monsters. And monsters could be killed. When Imperial forces finally entered the district, they found the demon prince dead. The civilians alive. And no sign of the warrior who'd saved them, except boot prints in demon blood and the lingering smell of potion toxicity. The Inquisition investigated. Found nothing. The White Wolf had already moved to the next contract. Geralt's new life had a rhythm. Track chaos incursions through his enhanced senses. Arrive before Imperial forces. Kill the monsters. Save who could be saved. Disappear before the Inquisition arrived with questions and execution warrants. Some space. Marine chapters quietly aided him. Black Templars, primarily. But others, too. Warriors who recognized that the Imperium's rigid classifications sometimes missed the truth. That heresy and heroism weren't always opposites. He built a network. Informants who told him where demons manifested. Tech priests who supplied equipment without asking questions. Guardsmen who looked the other way. Even a few rogue traders who provided transport between war zones. Geralt realized the bitter truth of this galaxy. The Imperium was humanity's best chance at survival. But it was also corrupt, cruel, and crushingly dogmatic. The Chaos Gods offered power but enslaved souls. Xenos factions pursued their own agendas, rarely compatible with human survival. There were no good choices, only degrees of terrible. Geralt had lived his entire life in moral gray areas. This galaxy was simply a larger, darker gray. He'd tried finding a way home. Researched warp rifts. Questioned psykers. Investigated conjunction echoes. But the trail was cold. He was trapped here. Might be trapped forever. So he did what Witchers did. Adapted. Survived. Found. Purpose in the hunt. The galaxy provided infinite monsters. Chaos demons. Genestealer cults. Orc warbands. Dark Eldar raids. Necron awakening. Tyranid splinter fleets. Each one a threat to human survival. Each one something he could fight. Geralt stood now in a transport ship's cargo hold, heading toward another war zone. Another planet. Another contract. The ship's crew avoided him. Rumors made humans nervous. But they didn't report him either. Word had spread. The White Wolf defended humanity, even when humanity didn't want defending. He checked his equipment with practiced efficiency. Silver blade sharp. Potions stocked. Armor repaired. Signs ready. Everything he needed for the next hunt. Through the viewport, he watched another planet approach. Orbital bombardments lit up its surface. Cities burned. Millions died in conflicts spanning continents. The galaxy ground souls to dust beneath the machinery of eternal war. Geralt had spent 90 years walking the path, hunting monsters, protecting people who feared and hated him. This galaxy was simply a larger path. He'd been called mutant, freak, monster, savior. Had been hated and needed in equal measure. Nothing new. Just different scenery. The ship prepared for landing. Geralt stood, stretched, felt old wounds pull and fresh ones ache. His body bore decades of violence. Would bear decades more before it finally gave out. But not yet. Not while there were monsters to hunt. Contracts to fulfill. People to protect. Geralt of Rivia walked toward the cargo ramp as the ship touched down. Twin swords on his back. Cat eyes glowing in the darkness. White hair matted with dust from 1,000 battlefields. Just another hunter in a galaxy of endless nightmares. Just another witcher on the path. The war would never end. Neither would he.